My grandfather married his sister. Now, I know some of you are thinking, well, that explains a lot. It wasn't quite as bad as it sounds. When my grandfather had left home, his mother passed away. And so my great-grandfather found another lady and married her who happened to have a daughter who was just a couple years younger than my grandfather. And so my grandfather went back home to meet his new mother and new sister, discovered she was a delightful young lady, and they ended up getting married. So they were technically brother and sister, but biologically not related at all. We as humans tend to be very tribal, and our tribes can be defined by our family. They can be defined as something that we are a part of. They can be defined as part of a group. They can be as large as something which fills a football stadium or as small as a book club. These tribes that we are a part of sometimes can be very, very affirming and sometimes very encouraging. Sometimes they can be very destructive. And we're all in numerous tribes. The tribes can be something which causes us to grow or something which actually is detrimental to us. The tribes are interesting in that sometimes we are a part of a tribe that we don't really want to be a part of, but we're kind of forced to be a part of, for example, as family or even in work. And sometimes tribal members can be very, very fractious. They can be very, very distant from each other. And then some sort of an event happens in which they are all drawn together. And people who formerly wouldn't even talk together are suddenly linked arms, and they're all on a common cause and marching down the street together holding strike banners or whatever reason. It's a curious phenomena of humanity that even though we wish that sometimes we were in solitude, the reality is that we are part of many different types of groups. Now, I want to take that concept with you to the Bible, and I want to talk about the idea of tribalness and the fact that we are part of a tribe and God's perspective and all that. And I want to begin with the person of Abraham, because he is sort of the father of tribes in a sense, of at least this tribe that God is instituting, that he wants in some way to impact the rest of the world. And so in the 15th, 16th, and 17th chapter of Genesis, God comes to Abraham and he says, Abraham, I'm going to make you the father of this huge tribe, this huge nation, this incredible nation. And Abraham doesn't even have any children. He says, I don't think this is how this is going to happen. And he says, well, you can trust that it will happen. And it's going to happen through your apparently barren wife, Sarah. She's actually going to have a child. And from that child, this huge tribe is going to emerge. It's going to cover the planet. And one of the most interesting things about this tribe is that God tells him that in chapter 17, well, first of all, in chapter 17, he gives them a unique sign of this tribe, and that's circumcision, which is kind of an odd but unusual aspect of this tribalness. And then he said, this tribe that I'm going to create in you is going to, in fact, not only impact you, but it's going to, in fact, impact the entire world, because through this tribe, the entire world, all of humanity will be blessed. This tribe actually divides into 12 different tribes. And again, you see the curiousness of these 12 different tribes. Sometimes they are united and they're all on the same side fighting a common cause. Other times they're fighting each other. And so sometimes there's this prejudice against each other. You're from such and such a tribe, and sometimes there's this unity of tribes and drawing together. And then finally, the 12 tribes are split into two huge tribes, the north and the south, and it continues on and on. What evolves from that is this idea that God has created this race of people as unique and special and privileged. And they believe that so firmly that they require every person that wants to be part of this tribe to be able to track their history, their ancestry. You have to be able to identify who your parents are, going back to, in fact, ensure that you are part of this unique, special, God-blessed, unique tribe on the planet. Curiously, if you follow the Jewish tribe tribalness. In the 2nd century, a group of rabbis got together and said, there's an issue here because you can never absolutely prove, this is before DNA testing, you can never absolutely prove who the father is. So they switched in the 2nd century and said, now it's not important who your father is, now we're going to say it's important who your mother is because everybody absolutely knows who their mother is. I was reading an article this week about the current Archbishop of Westminster Cathedral, and he recently discovered that the father that he believed was his father was in fact not his father. That just before his mother had gotten married, she had a dalliance with someone, one night thing, and then eloped with her future husband, and they presumed that he was a honeymoon child, and in fact, his father was someone else. So an illustration of their point that you can't be sure who your father is. Hopefully you can be fairly sure. So they switched over because that's what was important. It was important who your ancestry was. Now into this whole thing emerges Jesus. And the very first thing that is so interesting is that Jesus doesn't have a father. He comes into the world with no father, into a tribe in which the father is everything. The father is the one that ensures you're part of the tribe. And suddenly here's this little boy who says, well, I don't have a father. You can just imagine one of our young ladies coming to you and saying, I'm pregnant. And I said, oh, wow, that's harsh. Who's the father? Well, actually, it's God. And we've talked about that during Christmas, the oddity, the ridiculousness of that. But especially in this tribe, that was totally just ridiculous. How can you imagine to say that you are part of this tribe when you don't have a Jewish father? In fact, you have no father, you're claiming. And so from the very beginning, Jesus enters into this tribe with confusion, with dissonance, with controversy. He is stepping into it in a controversial role from the moment of his birth. And if you take this concept, Jesus is intentionally trying to disrupt their idea as to what this tribe is all about. And it's a fascinating study to go through all the parables and the encounters that Jesus has, and to see that he is constantly threatening their concept, their idea as to what a tribe is and what the tribe is. And they constantly go back and there's all these insinuations about his lack of fatherness, where they would say things like, well, our father is Abraham, insinuating that he's an illegitimate child. And God says, no, actually, that's not who your father is. Your father is Satan, and my father is God. And so there's this constant tension between God and the religious leaders as to what the tribe truly means. And I want to just take you to two stories in the New Testament and talk a little bit about that, and then talk about some implications for us today as to what it means. And the first story is in John, the 4th chapter. And it's the very familiar story of the Samaritan woman at the well. And Jesus is going from Galilee to Jerusalem. The shortest route is through Samaria, but it's not a route that very many people take because, and you've heard this story before, because the Samaritans were despised, they were looked down on, they were an aberration from the idea of the pure Jewish race, because they had intermarried during the captivity period, the period of captivity, and so they were no longer pure. And so as a result of their being rejected by the Jews, they, being very spiritual people, had in essence created their own tribe, the Samaritan tribe, and they believed that they were most true to God. And since Jerusalem had been sacked, they had created a special holy site on a very, very holy mountain, which was very close to where this woman was, in Sychar. So Jesus stops at this village in Samaria, and some people have inferred that the reason that he did that was because he was in a hurry to get to Jerusalem. He didn't want to take the extra time to go clear around, which is ridiculous because Jesus knows what's going on. If he needed more time, he would take the more time. He'd say, okay, it's going to take me this way. He wasn't in a hurry to go anywhere. His life was ordered and planned. So he intentioned to go through Samaria for a specific reason. And not only to communicate to people who were Jews that the tribe definition was incorrect, but he also wanted to define it beyond them. So he gets to the well at Jacob's well, which is near Sychar, and there's a lady there. Now, let me just pause for a minute and say that traditionally this woman has a specific view as someone who is a woman of ill repute. She's mentioned as having 4 husbands and a man now that she's not living with. So she is portrayed as someone who is immoral, who's living an immoral lifestyle, and that's why she goes to get water later in the day because no one's there. That's the typical story that has often been promoted. And I disagree with that finding. And there's a modern scholarly approach that takes a different thread on this lady. And it's not unusual to get water any time of the day. It wouldn't have been the hottest time of the day. The hottest time of the day would have been later on. But we don't even know what time of year it was. In the wintertime, it wouldn't have been a hot period at any time of the day. So that's not really a big issue as to what time she was there. The fact that she had multiple husbands could have been simply because of calamity in her life. And she could have been in that specific place because it was near Shechem, which was a city of refuge. In fact, Sychar and Shechem may have been the same city, and the city of refuge is where you went when there were people out to get you. And perhaps her previous husbands had died for some strange reason, and the families were irate with her, and so she was forced to live there. We don't really know the circumstances behind that. The other thing that I think is telling is that after she encounters Jesus, she goes back to the village, and they listen to her. If she'd been a woman of ill repute, they wouldn't have paid any attention to her. But they listened to her because I think she had an affinity with the people in the community. Well, we can talk about it more in Sunday school if you're curious about it. But anyway, he encounters this lady. And one of the most fascinating things about that is that she says, our tribe is here and your tribe is there. And Jesus pretty much comes back and says, you're missing the point because it's not about there or here. I'm talking about a tribe which is actually different than either of those tribes. This is a tribe which isn't specific by race. This is a tribe which isn't identified by your genetics or who your father is. He says this about it. A time is coming. This tribe is being formed when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem. You Samaritans worship what you do not know. We worship what we know, for salvation is from the Jews. Yet a time is coming, has now come, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in the Spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshipers the Father seeks. God is Spirit, and his worshipers must worship him in spirit and in truth. So Jesus is presenting this idea of a tribe which is larger, which is different than what she imagined. Now just turn back one chapter to another encounter that Jesus has with a man called Nicodemus. And know the story of Nicodemus. He was a Pharisee, he was a religious ruler. And he comes to Jesus and he's trying to understand how Jesus fits into his concept of a tribe. And Jesus makes a very, very profound statement to him. He said, the tribe that you need to be a part of, the tribe that is God's special tribe, isn't one which is a genetic tribe. It is one which you need to be reborn into. And again, Nicodemus is confused. He's trying to think, how can I be reborn? This is crazy. And Jesus says, it isn't a natural birth that I'm talking about. It's a spiritual birth. You have to be reborn in a spiritual sense. And this is the most profound thing that sort of reveals what this tribe is that Jesus is talking about. And it's a verse that all of you are very familiar with in John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his one and only Son, that whoever believes in him shall not perish but have eternal life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but to save the world through him. Whoever believes in him is not condemned, but whoever does not believe stands condemned already. In other words, This tribe that Jesus is talking about is a tribe which is available to the entire planet. It is a tribe in which we don't distinguish between each other, but we understand that we are all part of the same tribe. And I believe that this is a very, very important message for us today because we live in an age, in a world that is very fractious, that is very divisive. And even in this season of politics, it is so easy for us to feel that we need to be part of this particular thinking or that particular thinking, or that we have to say things this particular way. And I want us to be reminded that God's tribe is the entire planet. Yes, not everybody's in the tribe. Not everybody is on board with the tribe, but that's the tribe that God envisions. He doesn't envision a tribe that looks just like we look like. He envisions a tribe that is as diverse in appearance and in thinking and in theology and in philosophy and in education as vast as it is humanity. I think it's very easy for us to imagine that Christianity is the new tribe. That Judaism used to be the old tribe, and now we Christians are the new tribe. And in one sense, that's the way it's supposed to be, but the reality is that we treat it like we are something unique and separate and special, and we are hit and they're there in the same sense that the Jews did. And in the same way that God confronts the Jews and says, no, it's not about you and no one else. You are here to be a blessing to the rest of the planet. It's not that you're spoiled, separate, unique things. You are here so that you can invite and include the rest of my tribe. I want them all to be a part. I believe that how we can evoke this way of thinking is to be aware of our prejudices, to be aware of those ways in which we make statements which put people outside of our thinking, that we be aware of our prejudices, those people that we tend to look down on for whatever they believe or however they look or what race they come from, that we truly love people the way that God loves people, that we want them to be a part of God's tribe, but we accept where they are regardless of whether they choose to be or not, that we love them, that God so loved the world. And that's what he wants us to be, the recipients and dispersers of his love. And in that way, he wants them to be attracted to the tribe, not offended by the tribe or repelled by the tribe, but he wants them to look at the tribe and say, wow, that's what humanity is supposed to look like. Embracing, loving, accepting. Truly wonderful. I want to conclude with the benediction, but before I do that, I want you to just ponder it for a few minutes. And while you're pondering how this affects who you are and what you think, I'm going to receive an offering for the Deacons Fund. May the God of Abraham, the God of Jesus, open our eyes to see the world the way that he sees it, and to see ourselves the way that he sees us as well. Amen.